Okay, so we haven't shot in a couple weeks, and we left off at Genesis 18. I don't even remember. Let's see. Genesis 17 was circumcision.
Circumcision, that
16,
was the last episode, yeah.
yeah. And then Genesis 16 was God's chosen people. See, because we haven't shot in a couple episodes, I think if I recall, I had remarked when I edit the videos, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, there's just this really important thing that, none of us said. And then I
Mm.
always think to bring it back and at least make a mention of it. But now it's been 2 weeks, we haven't recorded, so I don't remember what that was. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there was something else I was going to say about circumcision, but it's been a couple weeks, so let me think. What was I going to say about that?
There's no way I'll remember mine.
Uh, I, yeah, I mean, we discussed a lot about how it's a mark in the most private area of one's body to mark your deepest
Mm-hmm.
connection to God, to the most sensitive part of your body. But also, I don't know if we mentioned that the scriptures say that God is life itself. Of the many things that God is life itself, and so your genitals are what produces life. So it's there where you would have the mark that would be closest associated to what God is, which is the part of you that actually creates life.
Yeah, for me, I think that marking it, keeping the marking private was hitting it very differently. It was hitting more like secretive and concealment type because, like let's say if you're part of the same tribe, you recognize each other based on those marks, right? You're like, oh, we're the same. But given the history, we know how Jews often conceal themselves within a culture as if they are that culture, right? German, American, and so on. But usually their loyalty doesn't lie with those cultures. Not all, obviously. So it's just, you know, it's crazy that I have to say not all, but that's the world we live in. So obviously, not all people fall into that category. But yeah, for me it felt more secretive, just knowing, I guess, the outcome history of how that has been.
No, it certainly can be
Yeah.
a useful if your marking is private, especially if your tribe are wanderers, if you're vagabonds essentially, and you're going in and out of different places. Um, it can be useful to not have it very proclaimed, who you belong to, if you belong to any particular
So you
tribe that may
can
be,
go under the radar more, yeah.
whether for nefarious reasons or for good intentions, either
Sure,
way,
sure,
you know.
sure.
I think someone once also said that because the marking is private, you don't know who is or who isn't, right? Going along the same sense, you don't know who is or who isn't. So you have to basically treat everybody the same, which is kind of a consequence of that. If someone doesn't have any explicit marking, um, they may or may not be part of your group if you don't know them directly. So you have to treat them, shalom, with peace, regardless, because you're not going to say, hey, let me look down your pants to see if you're one of us or not.
On that great note, give me 1 second. I just realized all my lights are off, and then we'll continue on
Oh,
chapter 18. Oop. While you troubleshoot, let me see how many. Oh my god. I was gonna say, how many more chapters are in the Genesis? Because I really feel
about
called
50
to.
total.
Yeah, I feel really called to start with the New Testament because I'm why do we keep lingering on the Old Testament? I feel like it's a trap in a way. And but yeah, we're at chapter 18 and there's 50, so we have
Yeah.
quite a.
And it ends with my favorite story of the Bible, which is Joseph.
Okay, Joseph. I'd
But
be curious, actually, people who are watching, what are your thoughts on that? I feel called to switch to read the New Testament, which is the I'm gonna say trigger people, the real Christianity. And like what, comment below, like what do you think? Should we finish this chapter or this Genesis and then
book,
this
right?
book, yes, thank you, and then go into New Testament, or should we with what I guess in this case I'm called for. I don't know about Anthony. Anthony can speak for himself, but
I want to read the Book of Enoch. I think people would love to
so you
see
want Book
that.
of
Yeah,
Enoch? I
that's very
want the New
popular.
Testament.
Mm.
Enoch is popular, yeah, but without finishing Genesis, I don't know about Enoch because you want to make sure to have that reference of the Genesis.
Right, right. Enoch would be good to read in between Genesis and maybe in between Genesis and Exodus would be the best time to go through Enoch.
Yeah, and then we will never get to the New Testament, real Christianity.
We'll start doing that soon.
Yeah. Or would you guys prefer if we sometimes just bounce it, back and forth? Like I'm just curious what interests people, Did you troubleshoot? Are you all set?
Yeah, I'm set. I'm going to read it off my laptop here just in case it starts to freeze.
Okay. All right. I
So
guess then we can just get into reading.
yeah, we've got two sections. We'll read it. They're very different stories, so we'll read the first part and discuss it, and then move on to the second part.
Okay.
Let's see. Chapter 18. And the Lord appeared to him by the silent oaks, right? By the oaks of Mamre, which was mentioned before, as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. And this is Abram,
Mm-hmm.
or Abraham. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, three men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth, saying, O Lord, as in like master, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under this tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, Do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it, and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? And he said, She is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son. Now he's identified as God here, the Lord said. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. That's a nice way of putting it.
Hold
So
on. The
Sarah
way
laughed
of
to
women
herself.
had ceased to be with Sarah.
So she's well past menopause, is
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that's saying. Yeah. Um,
Okay. Interesting sentence.
so Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? And at the appointed time I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, No, but you did laugh. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide? Well, actually, let's stop right there. This is getting into Sodom. So we'll stop at the prophecy of the Sarah having a child
Hold
after the
on.
3 men show up.
Hold on. So where do we stop? The 18, 19? The Lord said,
15.
15. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. I think we should finish this section, no?
Next one starts to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. They should have put the section heading between 15
But
and
you
16.
did laugh. Then the men set out from there, and they locked down towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. Shall I hide from her? Okay, interesting. I'm just thinking about Mambrei Karnumot. Mambre. What was Mambre? It's the same in Armenian Bible, but I'm not sure what that is or who that is.
So some translations say the oaks of Mamre. Some
Yeah.
say oak singular. Oftentimes, it's considered that it's a very, very large tree that's so large that it's well known.
It's just a
It's a
type or something.
environmental marker, right? And
Mm.
that's a place that was important for. We've already seen here in the story with Abraham. It's an
Mm-hmm.
important tree that they tend to be living around.
I see. I'm just laughing with Sarah because she just can't help it. Like she just can't help it but to lie.
Right?
No, I'm not laughing. Dude, you just laughed. What's wrong with you?
Well,
It's just
we already saw.
pathological. It's insane.
They already laughed before the first time that you know they when God said you're going to have a son, and they said, well, you're going to have to name the son Laughter, you know, because you laughed about it, which is
Yeah,
what
no,
Isaac
I
means.
remember that. I just sometimes catch the nuance that the book is actually quite phenomenally captures the details of the personalities, right? Like
Right.
I've been talking about how ridiculous and despicable this woman is, and then yet again here she's just like literally laughs, then says I wasn't
Denies him.
laughing, and then just like what? Like that's it's just so good at describing the pathological part of her. That's just absolutely astonishing to me.
Now, she clearly doesn't have a whole lot of faith in God.
No, no,
Still, yeah,
it's very
she still
clear.
hasn't had a. Mhm.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, to her in this particular case, if we isolate the rest of her despicable behavior, yeah, if you're a woman in menopause and realistically you're not supposed to be in that position, I can understand how you might just be like, what is going on? I have a doubt, obviously, right? But yeah, yeah.
So the part of the story that that Christians like to point out is particularly in the Orthodox tradition, because there's an actual physical icon based off of this part of the story, is that when God shows up, he shows up, there's three men there. And
Mm-hmm.
this is seen as an icon of the Trinity. Now, it's not the Trinity itself. It's not the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit that are showing up. It's Christ. It's the angel of the Lord with two angels with him,
Mm.
which is the traditional interpretation of this. But the fact that there's three showing up here is seen as an icon of the Trinity, as symbolically representing the Trinity of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And go ahead. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Um, no, I do know that it's a constant that of course Christians want to see all that in the Old Testament. Yeah, I know I don't have thoughts because I have a different understanding of why is the Old Testament important, not because we ought to find Jesus in it, but just to recognize the very clear thing that this is one set of how humanity's behaving, and then another, and then there's a rise towards against corruption, and then Jesus plays a role in that, in leading towards truth. But in my version, obviously, it's debatable whether I would see Jesus himself as God, and I would think that it's not even important because Jesus represents truth, and truth is, let's say, God. So, pardon me. So that's where I lose some Christians because it's just like you must believe in the Trinity and you must believe, I believe in Jesus and his message for sure, but I always have hard time with the Trinity.
The Trinity is actually what brought me back towards Christianity, but it was through a path of like metaphysics and studying the fabric of reality and noticing the patterns of three, and eventually and noticing that that's a tradition in all uh, esoteric religions, and seeing that relationship eventually brought me back to. But that's a discussion for another time. I don't want to get too far off of the topic of
Mm-hmm.
this chapter. What I do also want to mention before we move on to the next segment is that so when the three men show up, it's clear here It's translated "O Lord," but that's really just means "O Master" or "Sir," or some a formal declaration when Abraham sees the three. What's being pointed out here compared to what's going to happen later is Abraham's hospitality to strangers, right? So three men, he has no idea who they are. They just show up, and immediately he jumps up, he runs up to them, he bows down to them and says, "I am your servant." Really translated says, "I'm your slave. Let me feed you. Let me comfort you." And he not only gets, doesn't just grab some leftovers out of the fridge. He goes and kills a fresh calf. They get the best flour they have to make some cakes, and he lays out a feast for them. And he doesn't even know who these people are, but they're there, and he's treating
But
them.
that's very
He's
common.
welcoming them, right?
That's the common
And
culture of that side of the world, though.
well, it is now. The issue is, 4,000 years ago, there was no missing persons report, number you could dial. If you go traveling and you go to a new town and you disappear, well, you're gone. No one knows what happened to you, right? If you're wandering, traveling from one city to another part of the country, and a band of robbers comes and kill you, you know, you're shit out of luck.
Sure.
Um, so, like, being hospitable to strangers is such an important thing here because you can get away with a lot in the ancient world. You can rape and kill and kidnap and murder and steal all
But
you want. When
you underestimate how much. Of course, the population was so much smaller, and it's not entirely true in my experience, because Armenians have a lot of jokes around that, because we jokingly say Facebook's concept was created in Armenia because gossip travels extremely fast. So like, it's a small nation, and it literally feels like every single person knows each other, even though there's a couple million people, like 3 million people. It's because like, even before technology, you would utter some words, and then somehow within the same day, somebody else from the other side of the country already knows. And
mm,
it is fascinating how the world travels with or without technology. And in fact, because there was no technology and people were not distracted, more people were invested like, they would know more actually what's going on around them, who went missing, who was attacked, who's gossiping about who's cheating on who. I don't know, just like, it's just everybody is so much more known, like the real information within people, and of course infused with gossip. But I don't think that's true. Like, in my experience of pre-technology Armenia, there's zero difference. In fact, there's too much distraction now. We knew way more, way faster before.
well, I would say that's true within a nation, right? When you have because you're all part of the same culture, same religion, you're trading with each other, you're living in the same economy. That's
Mm-hmm.
true. But when it comes to one small city state versus and another one, and then another one and another one, some of whom hate each other. If you're traveling through a bunch of different towns and you're just stopping at different towns on the passing through, um, and one of them decides to kidnap you and turn you into slaves, you're kind of
You'd
you don't
know.
have a lot of recourse, uh, but
True
this
in
is
the sense that there's nothing you would be able to do, but the information would be instantly known that
oh
your
yeah,
enemy
sure, so people
captured
would
your. Yeah.
probably find out, yeah,
Yeah.
like, oh, either no one would ever hear from me again, or it would come back, oh,
It
they
also
got
depends
kidnapped
on
by
your
so and so or
family. Like,
disappeared.
were you just a single person? Where did you have a family behind you?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit complicated.
And so the reason I'm pointing this out is because in this story, it's going out of its way to really make this explicit, the difference between how Abraham treats strangers and what we'll see with Sodom and Gomorrah, how that
Oh,
town treats strangers. And so that's what's actually being displayed here is that we're
gotcha.
setting up a dichotomy in order to see the difference between Yahweh's followers and then the tribes in Sodom and Gomorrah and how they behave and how they treat travelers.
Yeah, one probably one is more of a advanced technically city where you kind of stir away from many traditions, right? Like it's progress. Oftentimes, progress does not respect to conserve values. They just go full force for the sake of progress. Doesn't mean it's bad. Progress is good, but so oftentimes the balance that's needed gets lost in the mix. And then in this case, I guess you're saying that it's this is the more conservative values, the more closer to God type of behavior versus in Sodom and Gomorrah, where it's just already detached from that.
Yeah, and it's really explicit in the story. I think it's really in the next chapter, but um, I think we've discussed this before about you can see the cultural differences up to modern times between inner cities and people who live out in the country, right? When you think about who are the Bible believing, conservative, family values, traditional people, they're the ones who tend to be living out more in the rural areas.
Yeah,
And as you get more centered to a bigger city, it becomes less and less religious, is
exactly.
kind of what's happened over time. And so that pattern is actually not new. That's ancient.
Yeah.
You start to lose your connection, and not the sense that there shouldn't be cities, but but going back to the Garden of Eden, it's a garden, which is different than a jungle or a city. It's about cooperating with God.
Yeah, no, I don't like. I don't mind the thought of, and this coming from me who used to say things like, "I think my marriage is with New York City. I would never live outside of it." So, but it would be. It's an interesting thought whether cities are actually inherently not good for the human soul. It's like just kills the morale, detaches us from the God and
Yeah,
nature, and ultimately sends us towards very self-focused, weird path towards materialistic gains, or I don't know, just
you lose your sense
changes
of
the
community when there's too many people around,
yeah,
and cohesion. You know,
yeah.
it's one of the few things I will agree with Karl Marx on when some of his critiques about the Industrial Revolution and how it separated the workers from the product in such a way that it actually created a spiritual detriment, which he was right about. You know, he wasn't wrong on everything. He had a couple things. His just prescription was bad for his observations.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely very true. Okay,
All right,
shall
we'll
we
move on.
continue?
So
16.
then the men set,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
no, yeah, verse 16. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him." Notice all of the nations of the earth, not just one. "For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know." So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose that there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of the earth do what is just?" Man, that's a lot of balls talking to God like that, right? And the Lord said, "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake."
Is
Abraham
negotiating.
answered and said, yeah, he's negotiating with God. Abraham answered and said, "Behold, I have undertaken to speak with the Lord. I who am but dust and ashes." So at least he has some humility here. "Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for a lack of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy
You
it if
go
I
from
find
50 to
45 there."
5.
Again, he
Not
spoke to him and
40,
said,
sorry.
suppose 40 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 40, I will not do it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered,
Mm.
I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, man, he's negotiating down. This is a tradition in Jewish culture.
Yeah.
He said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again, but this once. Suppose 10 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
So this is hilarious because after like going from 50 to 40, by the way, I misunderstood. I thought for a second he went from 50 to 5. I was like, wait, what? But no, that makes sense. So he goes from
He
50 to,
almost got down to 5. Yeah. He
yeah,
got down to 10.
from 50 to 40, then 30, then 20. And then at some point I'd be like, cut to the chase, dude. You're annoying me. What's the number you're after here?
Right.
Um,
So the first thing I'd point out here, unless you have some initial thoughts,
um, I don't remember how much he knows about Sodom, or he was just always kind of far away and Lot was there. So if I recall, Lot was there, so he's probably thinking
I'm
about
glad.
Lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you remember that. Yeah, Lot is actually living right outside the city.
Yeah,
In
so he's
fact, he's basically living with the city.
yeah, so he's probably negotiating down to see like, what if it's only one?
Right. At the very least, Abraham has a motivation there to save, his
Cousin.
relatives
Yeah.
and their family. Hey, at least 10 people that are somewhat righteous.
Which is actually very interesting and important, right? Because this is about human nature at its best, because what it comes down to is he couldn't give a shit if the entire city actually did burn as long as his family is safe.
Well, we don't. That's if his motivation is just to save his family. But I will point out what's explicit here, though, is that Abraham's not asking him to save just the righteous people and destroy the wicked. He's saying, will you destroy the entire city, or would you spare the city if 50 people are righteous in there? So even if there's
Mm-hmm.
10,000 evil people, and God says, even if there are 50 people or 45, he will not destroy all of the wicked because those 50 or 10 righteous people are still there. And I mean, there's a lot to be taken out of that. The fact that, because oftentimes, especially in the Old Testament, you see God as, you reward the righteous and punish the wicked. And this is saying, even the wicked can be saved if there are righteous people among them. And this is kind of a tradition in the Christian tradition
I'm
about
not
the
sure
idea
if
of
that's what it's
monks.
saying. I'm not sure if that's what it's saying. Rather, the fact that if there are 50 righteous people, he won't destroy the city because obviously those 50 would die also. So I guess the 50 righteous are worth keeping the wicked as well, just so that
Mhm.
they're not destroyed. Rather than, it's not, I don't feel like it's about the wicked at all. Rather just making sure that the righteous don't go with the wicked.
Sure. But God could easily destroy the wicked and save the righteous if he wanted to. But he's willing to spare the entire city of wicked simply because the righteous are there as well. And there's the idea that having some righteous people, trying to think of the best way to word this, it's part of the reason why the Christian tradition had missionaries travel throughout the world, is because having some righteous people anywhere can actually help save it. The same thing is spreading light everywhere, right? It's part of the tradition for Christian monks. The idea of, even though you're isolated away, but you're still within a nation. The fact that you have some righteous people there can protect that entire nation from destruction, so that the people within the city are still have the opportunity to turn towards righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes people look down on monks as, oh, you're just holed up in a wall and you're not actually doing anything for the world. You're just praying all day. But they would say that they're actually doing some of the most important work. Not they're praying all the time, which is interceding, asking God to help save wherever they are in the whole world. But just their presence alone in that area helps protects that area and the people there from destruction.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. For me, I think it strikes more as the human condition of. I mean, this whole thing is about the human condition, and I really like taking a deeper look into the psychology of it. Like I guess human condition is a better word, but so the way we already know Lot went towards the city, we already know that city is going to get destroyed. We also know Abraham, that's his family, and immediately after chapter 19 is labeled God rescues Lot. Of course, Lot is a pretty interesting, it's not an insignificant
He gets into a
character.
lot of trouble, pun intended.
Yeah, so he's not an insignificant character because he's a family he's a family member. And I do think, like, when I think about Armenians, we say this thing like blood is thicker than water, right? And we mean it, like, die hard. And I feel like in here, the way he's questioning God, like, or negotiating with God, it, to me, it strikes that he's negotiating for his family specifically. He's just basically unsure.
He could
Is
be, yeah.
is Lot going to be saved or not? Like, can he somehow rescue him
Right.
from all that? But
No, it
also the fact
absolutely
that,
would make sense that that's his motivation there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's oftentimes, I think, links to the fact that, most likely, if you have a family member versus if you have zero ties in with that, the most likely you wouldn't really be as invested and care as much, which is sad, obviously, but I think that's the reality of human nature. If you have personal ties or investments into something, that's when you really truly care.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's just, we can watch world wars happening. Well, not world war, the bad verbiage, but, like, we can look at what's happening in Palestine or what happened in Cambodia some years ago and all that. But most people just feel detached, right? Like, it's just they don't even comprehend the level of damage and violence and brutality and tragic loss of human life is happening in these wars, because from where they sit, they just have no dog in the game. So hence, their heart doesn't
Hmm.
skip the beat for them. Yeah, it just makes me think of all that.
Yeah, it's when you. It's part of the reason why Christians are called to see everyone as capable of becoming part of the body of Christ, because you don't dehumanize anybody, right? We're all one in Christ. There's no Jew nor Gentile, no slave or free man, no male or female, right? And so it helps you have a dog in every fight in the world, because they're all your people, right? They're
You
all children of
should.
God, just like you are, and so you ought to be praying for them just as much as if something was happening to your neighbor next door.
Yeah.
Although, you need to take care of your neighbor next door physically, right? You don't need to
Mm-hmm.
travel necessarily to the other side of the world to save some people. If everyone took care of their neighbors, then the whole world would be at peace,
Yet,
right?
how many neighbors next door take care of each other today? Or how many even family members take care of each other today?
Yeah.
It's
But if you go
Sodom
to
and
like an
Gomorrah.
Orthodox liturgy,
Hmm?
the prayers will be, you'll start with your community, but the prayers eventually reach the entire world. You
Yeah.
know, it, it's not an us versus them, a friend versus enemy. It's we're all children of God that are suffering. We all need to be saved by reconnecting to God.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of the suffering that you mentioned with wars and everything, I do want to point out here why God's planning to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So people usually when they think of the story, they think, oh, well, they were doing naughty things that God didn't like, so he was just going to wipe them all, kill them all because they were doing naughty,
Mm-hmm.
nasty things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in verse 20 here, it's very clear. He says, the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. In other words, who is crying out to God? It's the victims of what Sodom and Gomorrah are doing. And this
Mm-hmm.
actually calls back to like when Cain killed Abel. It was Abel's blood from the ground that cried out to God, right? And so And we saw that God will come to someone who's being victimized. We saw that with Hagar, right?
Mm-hmm.
He hears those who are crying out to him. So that's what's happening here is that, and we've discussed how human sacrifice and all sorts of horrible things were happening at this, rampantly throughout this part of the world. What's being said here is that those practices were happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. People were being raped and murdered and tortured and cannibalized, and those people were crying out for help. And those cries, God heard those cries, so He came down. Of course, He knows what's actually happening, but the story is, I'm going to come down to see if this is actually what I hear.
Yeah.
And if it is, then this whole place needs to be destroyed because this evil is horrible.
Yeah. There's a lot of outcries you should be hearing now around the world.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I do
that's a
like this
short.
as the beginning of the Jewish tradition of negotiating. Like, really
There's a lot of humor could
negotiating
be
with
had here.
God. Yeah.
From Sarah's
You're priced 50
pathological.
right from 50 righteous down to 10 righteous, Successfully negotiated it down to God Himself. And there is actually a principle in there of like, God will listen to your prayers. Like the way I take what I take from this, there's two ways you can pray. You can just say, God, you can do whatever you're going to do. You're going to do it anyway. Why do I need to ask for anything? Just, you're going to do your thing. Right. But that eliminates your own identity, your own sense of self, and your ability to actually be a person in a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you're not capable of actually saying, God, I want this, if this is something that pleases you also, I ask for this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so my takeaway from this section, other than the negotiation, is the idea that you can ask God for things, right? As long as it's something that He pleases Him as well, you can be specific about what you want from God. You don't need to just say, "All right, God, you're going to do whatever." Why even pray if you're, if you can't actually be specific about what you want from God? Why even pray at all? Why even ask for anything if He's just going to do His own thing?
Yeah. So he can. So it's basically not a force. You need to just simply fear from. Rather, you can have it as your pal. I'm kidding, but
But yeah, it's a relationship, right? Because so like the there's two extremes. One extreme is I am God, right? And I am right, I am God and I do whatever I want. The other extreme is complete total submission that eliminates your own sense of self,
yeah.
right? Which in a way is Islam is a lot like that. But so is a lot of Eastern religions in the sense of completely dissolution of the ego, right? You just completely
Mm-hmm.
eliminate any sense of self. And Christianity and Judaism here is not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to actually be like a real relationship where you can actually request things and you have your identity and God has His identity. And you don't have to completely eliminate your own desires. You just have to make sure that they are desires that are aligned with also God's desires.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting ideas. All right. Well, I think this is a short episode because I don't have much to add to this particular one. I guess we can conclude this and jump into chapter 19.
Now, the next episode's big booms and bombs are going to explode and lots of death and destruction and chaos. Yeah.
Fun. All right. Let's see it. If you guys made it this far, subscribe, please, and share with anyone you think might like the content. That would help us a lot. Thank you. Have a good one.